Hi everyone, welcome to the video. This week it's what you need to do as a PhD student for your 6-month review. Hey, welcome to the channel. If you're new around here, my name is Caroline. I'm a senior lecturer based here in the UK. So I work and I teach and I research at a UK university. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. It's nice to have you back on the channel. So today I thought we'd focus on PhD students and importantly the 6-month review that supervisors and students go through as part of their PhD process. So these 6-month reviews will happen depending on when you started your PhD. So often students will start their PhD in October, but most universities will also let you start either in January or April or July. And so your first 6-month review will be 6 months after you started. You'll then have one at the 2-year point, the 2.5-year point, the 3-year point, and the 3.5-year point. So what actually goes on? Well, at my university, we have a process where the student starts off by evaluating their performance over the last 6 months using a form. So they have to answer a series of questions where they reflect, quite simply on how they think things have gone, what research progress they've made, which conferences they've attended, how they've been able to engage with the research community, and any extra training they've taken part in. Then also importantly, the student is then asked to comment on whether they think they're on track to finish their PhD, both within the funded period and the university allowed period. And those two things can be different. So, quite often a student will be funded for 3 or 3.5 years. That is the funding period. But a university may allow you up to 4 years to finish your PhD, and that is the university allowed period. And so students have to tick a box saying how they think they're on track to finish within an allotted time scale. And also they're asked to note down if there's anything that's interfered or affected their studies or their research. So that all happens first. It's not a particularly arduous form to fill out. It doesn't take too long. The student fills out that section and then they pass it over to their supervisor. Now the supervisor's got hold of the form, they also do the similar kind of exercise. So they look at the student's performance over the last 6 months and they too, make a comment on what's happened, what the student's activities have been involved in, any key research highlights, where they think the student has had really good or beneficial extra training. And they also note down if they think there's been any external factors or influences, impeding the flow of that research. And then, like the student, they too are going to have to tick a box on how they think the student is progressing. But that doesn't happen until after the next section, and that is the section 3, the meeting between the student and the supervisor. So now both the student and the supervisor have filled in their preliminary bits of the form. Importantly, the supervisor is meant to send their part of the form back to the student so they can see it ahead of the meeting. Then the idea is that the supervisory team get together with the student. Now, in an ideal world, you'd have both the primary supervisor, the secondary supervisor, and any industrial supervisors. Sometimes, though, that can be hard to coordinate. So you might end up with just 1 or 2 of those people present. Key really is you need the primary supervisor and, of course, the student themselves. And so what you do now at this kind of meeting is you have a verbal conversation about what you both wrote on the form. So, are you on the same page with what you're thinking about the past research? The highlights the student has pulled out of, are they the same highlights that you've seen as a supervisor? Is there anything that you think the students missed in highlighting in the last 6 months that you really want to be brought out? And then you look forwards. So then you say, okay, that was the last 6 months. What's going to happen in the next 6 months? And obviously it's research, so you can't predict exactly what's going to happen, but you can make some research goals. So you can lay some kind of ground line and some plan of the key things that you think would be important for the student to seek to achieve in the next 6 months. And importantly, you make that plan in consultation with the student. So you might set an objective for a particular experimental study to be completed, or for the student to present their research at a particular conference, to get a draft of a publication journal paper ready by a certain date. Now, these are all kind of targeted objectives that you might put into that plan. And then my university also have it so that those objectives are owned either by the student or by the supervisor. So the bulk of the objectives are going to be owned by the student, but if there is a particular training need or a particular piece of software or equipment that the supervisor has to get ready for the student, that will be an action item owned by the supervisor. And then at the end of all of that, you then, as the supervisor, tick the box to say whether you think that student is on track to finish within the university period, the funded period, or actually if there's going to be some kind of problem and we need to look for some kind of extension or some other kind of issue or some other kind of remedy for a particular issue. So that's the first kind of 3 sections. So student first fills out their reflections for the 6 months, supervisor fills out their reflections for the 6 months, and the student and supervisor get together and not only reflect, but also forward plan for the next 6 months. Then after that, the student then has to make sure they have all the supervisor's signatories on the form. So any person that couldn't be at that meeting needs to review the form and make sure there's nothing that they want to add into the conversation. And then finally, the student can send it to the postgraduate research director. Now, at that stage, the postgraduate research director looks across all the comments on the form, and they too make a decision as to how they think the student is progressing and how they think the likelihood of finishing that PhD is within the funded and the university periods. And then very finally, once that's all been completed, the postgraduate research director sends it on to the dean. So the dean is the head of the faculty. Typically, there may be a number of schools or departments under the control of the dean, and they too will have a look at the comments and hold that record on file. So it sounds quite a complicated and long process. It's really not. It's really a way of ensuring that you have a 6-monthly conversation about how things have gone and how things are planned for the future. And then at around the 2-year mark so when you have your 6-month review, but it coincides with 2 years after you starting your PhD, quite often the university will also ask you to submit a thesis outline plan. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect, outline plans, chapter plans for theses will change, quite often right up until the day that they're submitted. But they want to see at that stage, the 2-year stage, that you have at least an outline of chapters. And importantly, you're highlighting the novel work. So what they're really looking for in those chapters is which are the novel contributing chapters that make your research as the student a novel contribution to your research field, and therefore going to be worthy of being awarded a PhD. So that, in a nutshell, is very quickly the 6-month review PhD process. If you're going through it, let me know how it's going in the comments. Maybe your university does something completely different. And if so, I'd love to know. So again, if you're a student or a supervisor and you have a different process with PhD students for formal review, let me know. I should add that on top of our 6-month review, we also have what we call these kind of reporting documents that have to be handed in each month, which are kind of mini quick electronic forms that we do to show that we're meeting regularly. But I can talk about that one on another day. So let me know in the comments, how do you review your kind of PhD performance formally as you go through your studies? But in the meantime, I hope you have a really good week. It's the last undergraduate teaching week of the academic year at my university. So I'm off to teach my last few classes. I'll be on live next on May the 15th. So if you're about British summertime, 1 p.m, I'll be going live on YouTube on the 15th of May. And if not, I'll see you here in a couple of weeks for another academic video. Take care. Bye.